The steps of Fleshmarket Close have always been treacherous. Carved from Edinburgh's medieval bedrock centuries ago, they plunge down through the old town's shadowed heart like a stone throat swallowing the unwary. During the day, tourists photograph their quaint irregularity, but locals know better. Locals know about the pusher. Sarah Mackenzie learned this truth on a fog-thick November evening in 1987. She was 23, a nurse rushing home after a late shift at the Old Royal Infirmary on Lauriston Place. The alleyways of the old town were her shortcut, a maze she'd navigated 100 times before. But that night the fog rolled up from the Forth like fingers of the dead, turning familiar stone into alien territory. At the top of Fleshmarket Close, Sarah paused. The steps disappeared into grey nothing below. Streetlights flickered weakly through the mist, casting more shadows than light. She should have taken the long way round, should have listened to the prickle of unease crawling up her neck. Instead, she began her descent. The steps were slick with moisture. Her footsteps echoed strangely, as if the stone itself was listening. Halfway down, she heard them, other footsteps, just behind her own. When she stopped, they stopped. When she moved, they followed. "Hello?" she called into the fog. Silence. Sarah quickened her pace, her satchel clutched tight against her side. The footsteps matched her rhythm perfectly, always just out of sight. Then she felt it, a presence at her shoulder, breathing that wasn't quite breathing, warmth that held no comfort. The push came without warning. Not violent, almost gentle, like a friend's encouraging hand at her back. But on those treacherous steps, gentleness was enough. Sarah's foot found empty air where stone should have been. She tumbled forward, her screams swallowed by fog and medieval stone. They found her later that night, neck broken, laying on the steps near the lower end of the alleyway. The police called it a tragic accident. Wet stones, poor visibility, a young woman in too much of a hurry. Case closed. But Sarah Mackenzie was not the first. Thomas Reid, a printer, fell in 1894. Ethel Bell, a seamstress, in 1923. James MacLeod, a merchant, in 1956. Always the same story. A solitary figure on the steps, a fatal fall. No witnesses save the fog and the stone. The pattern went unnoticed for decades. Who connects deaths separated by years, filed away in different ledgers, attributed to different causes? But Detective Inspector Alan Fraser began to see it in 1997 when his own investigation into a recent fall led him deep into Edinburgh's archives. Fraser was a methodical man, a third-generation policeman who believed in evidence over superstition. But as he traced the deaths backward through dusty records, a chill settled in his bones that had nothing to do with Edinburgh's cool autumn weather. 17 deaths over 150 years, all on Fleshmarket Close, all lone pedestrians who simply fell on the steps. The oldest record Fraser found dated to 1847, a brief entry in faded ink about one William Macbeth, a butcher who worked in the nearby grass market. Macbeth was found at the bottom of the steps with his skull caved in, surrounded by scattered coins from his day's takings. The constable's report noted signs of struggle at the scene, but identified no assailant. Fraser read on, growing unease gnawing at his detective's certainty. The handwriting was nearly illegible, but certain words stood out. Victim appeared to have been pushed. No signs of robbery. Local residents speak of a curse upon the steps. A curse. Fraser almost closed the file, but something made him continue reading. made him trace his finger along the faded words until he found the detail that stopped his heart. Witness Mary Crawford, age 14, claims to have seen Macbeth speaking with a figure on the steps moments before his fall. When pressed for description, the girl would only say the figure looked like Macbeth himself, but wrong somehow, like looking in a dark mirror. Fraser sat back in the archive room, surrounded by the scent of old paper and older secrets. A figure that looked like the victim, looking in a dark mirror. The detective in him rejected it, but the man who had walked these same steps countless times in fog and darkness knew there were things in Edinburgh's stones that defied explanation. He returned to Fleshmarket Close that evening, not as a detective, but as a man seeking truth. The fog was rising again, creeping up over the old town's depths like it had that night in 1987, that night in 1847, and all of the other many nights when innocent people had been pushed to their deaths. As Fraser stood in the alleyway, he felt the weight of centuries pressing down. Somewhere in the mist below, he could almost see them. All the figures who had fallen, all the lives cut short on these old stones, and among them one figure who had claimed the steps as his own eternal hunting ground. The butcher, William Macbeth, the first to die, the first to return. In the fog-thick darkness, Fraser understood with a sense of sudden clarity that flashed in his mind. Macbeth had been murdered on these steps in 1847, his killer never found, his spirit never at rest. But death had twisted him, turned victim into perpetrator. Now he stalked the steps he had died upon, seeing in every lone pedestrian the echo of his own final moments. In his confusion, his rage, his eternal repetition of that night, he pushed them just as he himself had been pushed. Fraser felt the presence before he saw it. A shadow in the fog, a figure that moved with familiar weight and purpose. The butcher was there, would always be there, waiting for the next person to walk alone down Fleshmarket Close. But Fraser was ready. He had come not to fall, but to understand, and perhaps, in understanding, to end it. "William Macbeth," he said into the fog, "I know what happened to you." The shadow stopped. In the silence that followed, Fraser spoke to the dead man's spirit, told him that his killer was long gone, that the innocent people he pushed were not the one who had wronged him. He spoke of rest, of justice finally acknowledged, of the peace that comes with letting go. When the fog cleared at dawn, Fraser returned to the alleyway. The presence was gone, not destroyed, but released. The feeling was palpable, the cycle was broken. No one has been pushed to their death on Fleshmarket Close since that night in 1997. But locals still avoid the steps in fog and darkness, still feel watched as they descend through shadows older than memory. Because in Edinburgh's old town, where every stone holds secrets and every close whispers of the past, some stories never truly end. They only wait patient as stone for the next chapter to begin.